all Dominicans at home and abroad on our agriculture, our economy, our foreign relations, our justice system, our governance, our international competitiveness, our education, our world-class festivals and entertainment, sports, politics, regional cooperation, and much more. Globally positioning Dominica within the Caribbean. Join the conversation on the Global View on Q. Tune in, call us, have your say. The Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station.
Good evening. Good evening to you on the radio, on the internet at home and abroad. Thank you for choosing Q95. This is the Global View on Q. A warm welcome to all of our Q family listeners at home and globally. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. It's Tuesday, 18th of March, 2025, the 11th Tuesday, 2025, and it's just about 8:03 p.m. in the studios at Q95, the big station. We're live on our radio frequencies on QTV, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Please follow us at Q95 FM Radio, share the live, like our pages, or on your phone numbers around the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. So get the latest breaking news and reviews on Q95 because you know it's true if you hear it on Q. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, love, peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. It is our 11th Global View on Q show for 2025. And we continue to engage with our local, regional, and global Q family listeners and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. The topic tonight is Dominicans need to stand firm to get best practice electoral and campaign finance reform. My co-host is Justice Dr. Irving Andre, and our panel tonight includes investigative journalist and UWP President Lennox Linton, UWP leader Dr. Thompson Fontaine, Electoral Reform Coalition ERC Chairman Johnson Boston, and Senator Delbert Paris. They will share their knowledge on the key essentials of electoral reform with a view to persuading Dominicans from all walks of life to come out and stand up tomorrow, Wednesday, in protest against the three flawed bills that are before the Parliament for the second and third reading and for passage into law. Flawed due to the lack of complete re-registration in Dominica and the absence of campaign finance regulations, among a few other things. So here are a few of my talking points tonight. All signs indicate that another tainted general election now appears to be imminent. But elections have consequences, and in any modern democracy, good or bad consequences. Tonight, our conversation will focus on tainted elections in a purposefully flawed electoral process, the imperative for best practice electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations in order to ensure free and fair elections on a level playing field, and after all, after 25 years, to finally move Dominica forward socially, economically, and culturally. We will expose the critical need for the people to come out in massive numbers to demonstrate peacefully in public, to enshrine the critical imperative that the people's power is greater than that of the people whom they elect and elevate and entrust to their high offices, who are supposed to wield that power in the people's best interests, but don't. We will examine the results of tainted elections in Dominica over the past several election cycles and expose their impacts and consequences, such as corruption, crime, bribery and treating, loss of manufacturing and processing jobs, including bottled water processing, loss of agriculture and agribusiness exports, healthcare problems, the brain drain and out migration, political victimization and persecution, environmental degradation, poor sanitation and non collection of garbage, selective dispensation of justice, persistent persecution of opponents of the ruling DLP regime, the high cost of living, and little salary increases for public officers, while cabinet ministers get 20 and 30% increases, reduced tourism visit arrivals and revenues, a failing economy and despotic governance, the 2019 brutal Salisbury attack, unaccountable CBI revenues, to name just a few among many other failures. Most right thinking Dominicans are of the view that it is high time to bring an end to this era of total power in the hands of any one man who can say, I run things. No law or constitution will prevent me from doing what I want or from accumulating massive personal wealth while the people and public officers struggle to survive and pay a very, very heavy price for the self-serving, lavish lifestyles of members of the political directorate who may solely want to remain in power, to take more for themselves. But history taught us that every dictator has an expiry date. So I look forward to the suggestions of our panel, our listeners, our callers and viewers on Facebook and YouTube as to what needs to be done to move beyond this era of stagnation and through a fair and fair election on level playing field, put true patriots in office who will work to make the people's lives better instead of focusing on just grabbing more and more for themselves. Enough is enough. We have been under this one regime for 25 years from January 2000, but the people have very little personal progress to show. Our youth continue to be sidelined and left behind. Our economy is continuing to slide on a slippery slope. Together, Dominicans must repair our reputational damage, reverse the assault on our consolidated fund, and bring our money back home to boost the prosperity of our Dominican people. Give them hope again and rebuild our once thriving dynamic middle class and all of our small business sectors. My co-host, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, investigative journalist, UW President Lennox Linton, UW leader Dr. Thomas Fontaine, RC Chairman Johnson Boston, and Senator Delbert Paris will share their views, their ideas, and recommendations on some of these talking points, as well as their own talking points and more, with a view to moving forward on a path to proper electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations in Parliament and free and fair democratic elections, real independence and self-actualization, dynamic socio-economic autonomy, real growth, and generational wealth creation. So after 25 years, it is high time to put a new dynamic law-abiding group of people in government as soon as possible to implement a progressive, people-driven, growth-oriented, tangible action plan for the benefit of all Dominicans at home and abroad. So let's get down to business. As usual, we invite you, our Q family and friends of Dominica, to help us give our full usual shout out, hugs and love and appreciation, a big thank you to our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police and welfare officers, our teachers, our doctors, our nurses, public and private sector patriots and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. And as I always say, we welcome each and every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are tonight, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community at home and abroad, in the region and globally. Thank you, Sherwin, for keeping us on the air. Big up Lambi on the console directing the traffic tonight. We will take your calls. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority on Q and on the Global View on Q. So call us anytime during the program. Lambi will signal us whenever you call. These were my talking points for tonight. My co-hosts and panelists will expand and deliver on their own ideas. So I go first to Justice Dr. Irving Andre for his opening remarks to get the ball rolling. Your turn, Dr. Andre.
Thank you, Mr. G, for your eloquence and your erudition. Let me thank the panelists who are here this evening, a distinguished panel. Let me thank your listeners, and let me thank all those who have sacrificed to make a difference, to make a change in what takes place in Dominica these days. And we stand, vocally speaking, on the very eve of a mass protest by Dominicans over what passes for electoral reform. And it is clear and it is justifiable that Dominicans have a great concern about what is going or what is planned to be enacted. They have concerns on a number of grounds, which I'll get into very shortly. They also have significant concerns over the declaration by the Prime Minister that he has invited the RSS, to visit Dominica to maintain stability. In other words, to intimidate Dominicans. Now, it is clear that the leadership in the Eastern Caribbean is acting like a mafia organization with their own stormtroopers ready to keep the population of the islands, particularly the smaller islands, in a state of virtual servitude. Mr. G, you made reference to what happened during December of 2019, what happened in Salisbury. But it is not just what happened in Salisbury that was despicable. It is the fact that it happened on the eve of a general election. It is despicable because some of these stormtroopers were engaged deliberately to intimidate and go on the offensive against persons who were merely exercising their rights in a free and democratic society. But it was despicable also because it was exercised against a people who were known as an entity, a village, a constituency, to be supportive of the opposition party. So make no mistake about this. What was done was egregious, it was deliberate, and it was designed to ensure the electoral victory of the incumbent minister. But that is not the only instance where leaders have resorted to using that RSS as part of a storm troop kind of group of people, soldiers or whatever they are. On October 5th, 2022, Mr. G, there was a Trinidadian national called Brent Thomas who was dragged out of a hotel room by Barbadian police and handed over to their Trinidadian counterparts at the Barbadian airport. And what happened? The Trinidadian police, who were waiting for this gentleman, Brent Thomas, they placed him on an aircraft operated by who? The RSS. And they returned him to Trinidad in clear violation of all the extradition laws of Barbados. There was a subsequent lawsuit, legal action, initiated in Trinidad by Thomas, and there's a justice called Judge Rampersad. He ruled against the Trinidadian police and the Trinidadian state and awarded significant monetary damages against both entities for what was a clear and blatant violation of the law, partly facilitated by the RSS. So this is no accident. This is no coincidence. These leaders, many of them, and I appreciate what the opposition leader of St. Lucia said today, they are operating like a mafia family. And Dominicans have to see this for what it is. They are using their muscle, their muscular fortitude, their arms, their guns, and their army uniforms, to intimidate for one purpose: to thwart the democratic will of the people and to keep a despot dictator in power. And this is why this is so offensive. We have to break that cycle. And why is that taking place at this juncture? We've talked about it many times on this program. We've talked about what is so obvious in terms of these so-called electoral reforms that are being rammed down the throats of Dominicans, because that's exactly what it is. You may or may not recall, Mr. G, months ago I talked about the Frankenstein monster that is lurking, ready to devour democracy in Dominica. Bear in mind this bill, these three bills constitute a banquet for a dictator and his enablers, whether it's the attorney general, whether it's the lawyers who are circled around him, making millions through the sale of passports, whether it's those in the Electoral Commission who are maintaining a conspiratorial silence, a betrayal, a Pontius Pilate betrayal of Dominica. They're all in this thing together. And it's only us who can rescue ourselves from the grip of this Frankenstein monster. You have identified, Mr. Linton has identified, Dr. Fontaine has identified, Mr. Paris has identified those odious aspects of these bills that are being proposed or rammed down the throats of Dominica. The most odious component of one of this bill is the total absence of campaign finance reform. But we know why. Because they want to continue to do what they've been doing over the last 10 to 15 years. They want to legitimize and normalize the theft of elections. The prime minister that talked about, well, we try to compromise. You don't compromise on principle. Why is it that selectively what he doesn't want to compromise on is campaign finance reform and cleaning the voters list? There is method to his madness, or there is method to his degeneracy, because these two aspects of campaign of electoral reform will guarantee him perpetual longevity in government to the detriment of our democracy. And there's no mystery as to why they want it so. Ask yourself about the House of Dark Secrets. Ask yourself about the villas in Savanpaya where they are. Ask yourself about the mansions being built at Mont Daniel. Ask yourself about the $400,000 house in Vacaz. Ask yourself about the clear evidence that the state coffers are being robbed systematically by a band of, I'll let you fill in the blanks. So we don't have to sit here and quote Bible and verse and talk about section 3 said this. Nonsense. We have to call a spade a spade. And the fact of the matter is this. With the omission of campaign finance reform in any proposed reforms of our electoral laws, you give these folk a carte blanche to continue to rob and steal elections. With the refusal to cleanse the voters' risk and talk about some bogus confirmation of the names that are already there, you're doing the same thing. You're allowing them to do what they've been doing before. You're stealing your democracy. You're robbing it of its life and its liberty. And you're keeping your own people in a state of perpetual poverty, those who are identified as not supporting this odious regime. We've seen examples of what is happening in Dominica. It is blatant. It is in your face. There's no attempt to hide it. The discrimination is clear. Ask Lennox Linton, Dr. Fontaine, Edison James, what happened to them with a bogus charge that had no legal validity, that was bad in law. What happened to them? Ask those who've been deprived of basic help because they are identified as not supportive of the government. Ask those who shamelessly receive gifts at Christmas while looking at their neighbors being starved of the very same gifts. Ask those who've been deprived of their jobs, whether it's Vescott Jones or other persons. Lambie, for God's sakes. Ask those who've been deprived of the ability to earn a living in their own country. Ask those whose lands are being robbed under their very noses in Wesley. Ask those whose business have been shut down because some foreigners have been given unfair advantage over them in terms of their means of earning a living. Ask these folk, what are the effects of the lack of campaign finance reform or electoral reform? They are being treated not as second-class citizens in their own country, but as third-class citizens. Ask those who have been deprived of opportunities to use their trucks, those who have been deprived of opportunities to put in a bid to get a job to feed their families. Ask those who have been mocked because they're not given an opportunity to build their businesses, to repair their hotels. Ask those who have not been given the protection of the law because they are identified as supportive of the opposition. These are the fruits, the forbidden fruits of the absence of electoral reform. A state where discrimination, victimization are institutionalized. And this is why this fight has to be fought. This is why the people have to rescue themselves. And this is why, quite frankly, the rule of law has to prevail. And for those who seek to bring to the regional authorities and persons and international sources what is happening, that is a sacred patriotic duty. What is happening in Dominica, that story must be told. And the eyes of the world have to be on Dominica. Because all this song and dance about we being such a lovely land of 365 rivers, we are so nice and friendly, this garbage, quite frankly, should be set aside. Because that is the propaganda being used to hide exactly what is being done in Dominica. So, I am not preaching hope and redemption. I am preaching, quite frankly, a spiritual awakening, a political awakening by Dominicans. And fortunately, the forces are aligned for the forces of good to eventually triumph, hopefully sooner than later. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for the opening words here, Dr. Andre. Dr. Fontaine, if you're with us, obviously the refusal to implement the complete re-registration of electors in Dominica and the refusal to include campaign finance legislation and regulations in this electoral reform process clearly confirms all of the things that Dr. Andre is talking about here. I mean, it is really meant to perpetuate this regime in office, and so that they continue doing all of the things that Dr. Andre just mentioned, that I pointed out a little bit earlier as well. Dr. Fontaine, if you're with us, could you open up your mic and maybe you can tell us really why it's important for people to come out tomorrow, for the people's power to really demonstrate that the people have the capacity to make a demand for what it is that they really want, and that the people in office should listen to them. So your mic is muted.
Yes, well, good night, Mr. G and Dr. Andre, Lennox, Delbert, and Bosso, and of course, Lambi, and to our many listeners. It's good to be with you here on Global View on the eve of a very important day for Dominica. I think having spoken to many people across Dominica and having been, focused on trying to kind of get as much support as possible for tomorrow, I must say that tonight I'm quite upbeat in terms of the expectations. I'm quite pleased that a number of persons have responded positively but we still need more people. As I said, we need to see young people, we need to see old, every shade of Dominican need to be present. It would be good if we could get a throwback to the 70s when, days like that, school children would come out in their uniforms and see, and that, and in a way, it was that curiosity, of the 70s that got me to where I am today. I think my involvement in politics and interest in politics was kindled in the 1970s, and having to go out there as a young school child and see the agitation, see the passion, see people standing up for what they believed in. It was a very different Dominica back then, but one I'm sure that we can recreate in terms of the interest in politics, especially among our young people. So I wanted to make a very special appeal, in particular to the youth of Dominica, because after all, we're doing this not for ourselves, but we're doing this for the young people of Dominica. We're doing this for this and future generations. It's about preserving our democracy. It's about ensuring that no one person can rule as a king in this land, and ensuring that democracy prevails. And how do we get democracy? We get democracy through having some of the issues that we have raised. And I'm a little bit concerned tonight that after all of the resources that have gone into this, not only financial resources, I'm sure over $1 million was spent in getting feedback, organizing meetings, and all the rest of it, paying Sir Byron, but just in terms of the time that have been invested by different parties in Dominica, by different individuals, the amount of time that was invested reading the legislation, making recommendations, having meetings and workshops, a tremendous amount of time went into that exercise. And at the end of the day, we get a document that no one really believes in. We see a document that is devoid of a lot of what we would have hoped for. And that's the reason why we are standing tomorrow. We are not just going out there because we want to be out in the hot sun. It's very, very hot. And believe you me, tomorrow is expected to be an extremely hot day as well. It's extremely hot at already 9 o'clock. It will be blazing hot. So we're not necessarily out there because we want to be in the hot sun, but we want to be out there because we need to send a very strong message that the legislation in its current form is simply unacceptable. This prime minister needs to go back to the drawing board. He needs to listen to the experts, listen to Sir Byron and all the work that he did, the legal drafting person that did all of that drafting and so on, listen to the commissioners of the Electoral Commission who took the time to give input, and use that as a basis of the reform. And so we reject what we have seen. It does not go far enough. We do not believe that this list in its current form should be the basis of any discussion going forward. The list in its current form should be shredded, set aside, and we have a complete and total re-registration. And that is something that can be done simply. We heard today that it took 3 months in Antigua with almost twice our population. Actually, probably more than twice our population. It took only 3 months. And yet we are dedicating 15 months to an exercise in Dominica, which we are told can be interrupted at any time with the calling of a snap election. That is simply unacceptable. Why not do the re-registration, allow for 3 or 4 months, get it done, and then we are clear the way I've been cleared. So if you want to call your election after that, you can call your election. I just find that, I think we have taken enough. And one of the things that I must commend the people of Dominica for is their patience. We have been extremely patient. We've seen report after report from the OAS, from the CARICOM, from the Commonwealth, all observers who've come to Dominica with the same message. We've been lucky that we were able to get a hearing before the CCJ. They came with the same verdict, the same comments: tainted elections, not free and fair, neither free nor fair, need for change, need for improvement. Everybody has said the same thing. and yet this very stubborn prime minister refuses to do what is right. So I think it's important for us to stand up, and I truly hope that everybody within the sound of our voices tonight will show up tomorrow. You can take a day from work, report, if you report sick or whatever process you have, to be out there, but by all means, come out in your numbers. Let us register that we are concerned about electoral reform and that we want to see that those reforms are enacted for the betterment of Dominica.
Yes, thank you for the opening words there, Thompson. I want to go now to Senator Delbert Paris, because Senator Paris, you are going to be in the Parliament tomorrow, and these bills that are being laid on the table before Parliament for debate, for the second and third reading and for passage, obviously they contain, the, the, the problem is the absence from those bills of two of the fundamental things, the whole question of the re-registration in Dominica and the absence of campaign finance reform. I mean, how do you propose to deal with this tomorrow? And let's face it, I know that you've been doing some work on the ground yourself and trying to get around to the people to ensure that people turn out tomorrow to protest, to show their disgust and their dissatisfaction with the bills that have been placed before the Parliament. How do you intend to deal with that tomorrow in the Parliament? And another thing that you might want to address your mind to is we noticed that the court on slightly different matter, but I thought it important to bring it up here tonight because the court dismissed the cases against Edison James and Lennox Linton and Thompson Fontaine. But I know that the question was raised in Parliament some time ago as to how much money was paid to these lawyers who have been representing the state on those cases. I don't know whether you intend to raise this in Parliament again, but you will let us know what you're trying to do. But give us your thoughts on what you intend to approach this in Parliament tomorrow. And you can unmute your mic.
Mr. G, good evening. You can hear me now?
I'm hearing you very well now.
Excellent stuff. Dr. Andre, Dr. Thompson, Johnson Boston, Lennox Linton, Lambie, and the rest of the guys, and everybody listening. Thank you for having me back on Global View. It's been a couple of months since I've been back here, but it's my pleasure to be back and doing the work of the people. Mr. G, we have a historic day tomorrow coming up. Historic for many reasons. But it is also, and I'm optimistic tomorrow that we will have an amazing turnout tomorrow, that the people will let their voices be heard. And we will demonstrate once again, like we've done in the past, as a collective, that Dominica belongs to us. And collectively, we will decide on the way forward for our country, regardless of who's in the positions of leadership. Your position does not make you king or overlord. It makes you servant first, and servant to the people of the sovereign Commonwealth of Dominica. And I think one of the things that our leaders need to understand is that the position doesn't belong to them. It wasn't left for them on some will by someone, and they need to respect the wishes of the people. They need to respect the wishes of the people, and your governance and your leadership should never be about creating and fostering chaos. It should be about ending chaos and ensuring that the type of governance that you lead out with always results in peace. Of course, we won't agree on everything, but there are fundamental principles that govern every one of the lives that we live. And our leadership, our governance must always point to satisfying those principles and ensuring that not just us, but 50 years from now, the people who will come after us will be grateful for the work that we did and for the position that we left the country in by the time we were gone. Mr. G, tomorrow we have some work to do in the Parliament. We have some bills that we are going to be addressing. You know, the three bills. They're all connected. We will be dealing with them separately. But like you pointed out earlier on, and I hear members of the administration using some type of twisted analogy to say the same people that called for electoral reform are the same people who are planning protests now, in a very
derogatory and insulting response to people standing up for their rights. But you can pretend to do a good thing and do it in a bad way, and that's what's happening tomorrow. That's what's being proposed tomorrow. Because there are two critical elements of conducting a reform exercise. Mark you, a reform exercise that we are, and I heard Dr. Thompson mention it a while ago, and Dr. Andre alluded to it earlier on, that we have been paying millions of dollars for. Officially, we've gone past 7 figures, and we decided to discard that. And apparently now, out of the blue, we recognize that the people who are on the payroll, who've been on the payroll for the last 25 years, could have done the work that we asked Sir Byron to do in a very disrespectful manner, if I might add. But it's leaving out things that he had proposed, things like critically campaign finance regulations, something that is revered across the world, and international best practice is moving towards ensuring that we have and that they have functional campaign finance reform legislation in their political process. But why is that important? That is important to make sure and to ensure that you're not allowing big money interest, corrupt money interest, fraudulent money interest to compromise the authenticity and the validity of your electoral process. Because at the end of the day, the electoral process, Mr. G, is about selecting representatives. And why are we selecting those representatives? Well, simply because the system of governance that we have adopted is bringing a group of representatives together that will speak on behalf of the people, so that we're not using a broad system where every citizen votes on every issue. We say no. Sustainable system, group of representatives. And that group of representatives is selected by the people in the different constituencies that they represent. And they represent them on the basis of expressing their issues and their voices in a way that when decisions are made at a governance level, the trickle-down effect of it is that these people who are electing representatives are the ones who will live with the consequences of electing those representatives. Now, why would you want to compromise a process like that? Why would you want to have that process tainted in a way that does not allow for a direct relationship between representative and the governed population? As much as possible, all of our work should be geared towards ensuring that the people who are elected as representatives, the decisions that they're going to make, and the people who will be making those decisions will directly affect them. When we operate like that, it ensures that the people who are selecting those representatives, and in an interval system, we're ensuring that those people are cognizant of the fact, and they are marking and analyzing and reviewing the performance of their elected representatives on a consistent basis, because the work of their representatives affect them. Campaign finance reform ensures that you don't bribe people. That will reduce the instances of bribery and treating and compromising and corrupting our electoral process. Why would our government not want to make advances in that direction? Why would we want to move away and find loopholes that would allow us to escape from making advancements in the direction of implementing true, universal, best practice campaign finance regulations? There are not many reasons why that would happen, but we're going to be discussing that tomorrow. Another thing that we're going to be discussing critically, you pointed it out early in your talking points, is the register of electors. Who is on the list? Who is participating in this process? We understand the sovereign right to vote and to participate and to get on the register, to get qualified to be on the register, and to ensure that once you're on the register, you should be voted. But we have to ensure that the people who are allowed to participate in the process of electing representatives are eligible to do so. The spirit of the legislation speaks to that. The way that it is set up in our constitution requires that the process of getting onto the register requires you to first meet and maintain your eligibility criteria. It's not just a fun, ritualistic exercise that we engage in every time we want. It's not a carnival. It's not a party. It's not just a fun exercise that we do just to say we can do it. It has real life implications for the people that are going to be affected, particularly the people that will be affected directly, like your residents. So we want to ensure that these people's voices are never drowned out and it's never diluted. And their voice, the people that go to the hospital looking for healthcare services, we want to make sure that their voices are the ones that are heard the loudest during the process of electing representatives. The people that are struggling with waste disposal and garbage disposal on a day-to-day basis now in Dominica, we want to make sure that their voices are heard the loudest. We want to make sure that their voices are the ones that are heard the loudest. The young people who are looking for a future in this country, the country of their birth, we want to make sure that they are the ones, their voices and their participation is not diluted at all, not by big money or by people who won't be affected by the consequences of selecting those representatives. So, Mr. G, we have some work to do tomorrow. It's going to be a long day, but we're prepared to do the work. We're prepared to do the work of the people. And we know that while we're doing some work inside of the parliament, the rest of the good people of Dominica will be outside doing the rest of the work, sending a message that we're still interested in the future of our country and we're standing for what is right.
Yes, I certainly hope that a lot of people will turn up tomorrow and be outside to demonstrate to the political directorates that they're not satisfied with the provisions in the bills and the omission of two of these crucial things in the bills. And but Lennox, I wanted to come to you because you notice these two things that are left out there, the total re-registration in Dominica and campaign finance reform. You notice that these things really are synonymous with this thing that Dr. Andre had put in one of those, for the ERC, one of the recommendations that there should be a specific mention in this thing of for the avoidance of doubt that bribery and treating is illegal. And every provision is made to eliminate bribery and treating. But then we notice that the fact that campaign finance reform is out, and then just reconfirmation in Dominica. What it means is that you could continue to ensure the list remains tinted, and you can simply say, without campaign finance reform, you can simply bring in 4,000 people from outside, pay their passage, give them pocket change, and give them money to spree and so on, and come down and locate 300-400 people in select constituencies to win an election. So, your thoughts on some of those, on Lennox?
Thank you, Mr. G. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Andre, Senator Paris, Dr. Fontaine, Johnson Boston, Lambie at the controls, the rest of the Q family. Good evening to everybody. Good evening to the brothers and sisters of Dominica, the patriots of this blessed land at home and abroad. It's always a pleasure to participate in these conversations about Dominica and where we're headed. I am thinking tonight about the number of people who are out there listening to us and want to be clear in their minds, why is it's important for them to be outside of the parliament tomorrow? Why is this National Assembly outside of the parliament important? Well, we have been on the journey for electoral reform for the better part of the last 20 years. It seems at points we have been like on a merry-go-round, with one man turning and twisting us, saying one thing today, saying something else tomorrow. And all we have been talking about where this electoral reform is concerned is improving the system for electing representatives to the House of Assembly, that it becomes free and fair. Fair being much more important than free, because people are free to vote in elections in Dominica. It's the fairness of elections that concern us, and the reason why we have been focused on the necessity for these reforms of the process. We're not talking about reform to do anything else but to improve the electoral process, and improve it to remove the taints that have been identified by the Caribbean Court of Justice, or Apex Court. We have spoken a lot about them, but yes, we're not the only ones who know that our electoral process is tainted and needs to be reformed. This Caribbean Court of Justice has told us. The Organization of American States has told us. The Commonwealth Secretariat has told us. Look at the reports from the observer missions through the years, and you will see the record of concern about the condition of our electoral process, which is set up by the election laws we have. So, correctly, we are seeking to change the laws, to make changes to the laws so that the electoral process is improved. And now that we have come through all of these years, going back to those days of madness going on at the commission, because the Independent Electoral Commission had said that they were going to clean the voters list and issue ID cards for voting. It was described by the Labour Party and the Labour Party advocates as madness, and something that would interfere with the re-election legacy of the Prime Minister. How did they know that the Prime Minister was going to have a re-election, a legacy of winning elections back in 2008, when he only contested one election as leader of the party? They telegraphed to us what they were planning to do, and we didn't take them seriously. So what they did was they spent the last 20 years or so working on the re-election legacy of Skerrit, and manipulating, looking at laws, looking at the election laws, seeing the loopholes that they could take advantage of. And now that we've been talking about reform, rather than close those loopholes and provide legal clarity against a number of the things that amount to taints on the process, they instead have come with amendments which don't really improve the process for electing representatives to Parliament. As a matter of fact, the laws that are going before the Parliament, provisions in those laws, and there are two of them, there are three of them. We have the House of Assembly Elections Act. Listen to the name, the House of Assembly Elections, meaning this is an election to elect representatives to the House of Assembly in Dominica, the Parliament of Dominica. Not a vote, not a process that gives you a vote to decide who's going to be a boss tomorrow at work, or whether you're going to have, whether your garbage is going to be picked up tomorrow. You're not going to vote for that. You're going to vote for the right to vote is a right to vote for representation in the Parliament of Dominica. And who should be voting for the representation in the Parliament? It is persons who are 18 and over, Dominica Commonwealth citizens who are resident in Dominica. You don't get on the voters register without fulfilling those three qualifications: age, 18, citizenship, residence. It means the intention of the framers of the Constitution, and which makes sense to all of us, is that voting must have something to do with residence, because voting is about the Parliament where you reside, governance by the Parliament where you reside. So you're voting for that. And you know, this revised legislation, which is why the people must stand, is now telling us that it is okay to ignore the constitutional requirements to vote, to be on the voters register, insofar as it concerns residents. We must ignore that qualification because the government says we are affecting the franchise of persons who have left our shores, gone to live elsewhere, but are being used. But the government wants to continue to use them to determine the results of election for those of us who reside in Dominica. That system can never be fair. So those of us who live in Dominica and do not believe that our brothers and sisters living elsewhere should be paid to come home to vote, to determine for us results of elections in constituencies where they do not live, they do not reside, therefore they cannot be represented. In a country where they don't live, they don't reside, they cannot be represented in the Parliament of Dominica. Mrs. Kerry says, well, yet this is a big plank of the process that the government is now seeking to give legitimacy to with the laws that it is bringing to Parliament. So now we are normalizing, we are making lawful and okay a system where electing representatives to Parliament involves bribing the ruling party, bribing overseas Dominicans to come home to vote in certain constituencies to determine the results. The amount of money spent on bringing home these voters from wherever they are around the globe, in the numbers that they brought in, represents more money spent per head, per voter, more money spent per voter by a political party than is spent anywhere else in the world. This is the most amount of money per voter that is spent on in any election anywhere in the world, including the United States of America. Because when you count all the billions that they raise, all the hundreds of millions that they raise, you don't get to more than $20 or $30 a head spent per voter, per registered voter in America. Think of the amount spent per registered voter when the ruling party is paying for airfares from America, from London, from around the world. They're paying for ferry tickets, etc. That kind of spending, that kind of extravagant spending ought to be checked. It ought to be regulated. They don't want it regulated. So they're tying in with the provision in law now that once your name enters the register, it cannot be removed. That is the technique for protecting the pool of overseas voters that they bribe every 5 years to come home to vote in marginal constituencies. No campaign finance reform regulation means they can spend any amount of money that they want. In the context of Dominica, any amount of money is any amount of money, because of the significant sums of Dominica's passport money that have been unaccounted for and is available out there under the control of friends of the Dominica Labour Party to be used for exactly those purposes. Buying the election, making sure that all the things that they need to do to bribe, to treat, are financed. So understand what is happening tomorrow. Tomorrow, when you go to when the nation assembles outside of Parliament, the nation will be assembling because the nation, meaning our people who are living in Dominica, are not happy that they have been marginalized, that their votes are being overpowered, that their franchise is being affected, while the government is concerned only about the franchise of Dominicans who have left our shores and are living overseas. That's the franchise that they're concerned about, not the quality of the franchise of the Dominicans who are living here and therefore should be the ones with the responsibility to select representatives and government where we are living. The Prime Minister says very eloquently. You cannot have a Dominican voter living in New York who is calling you, the power rep in Dominica, to fix the potholes in the road in Manhattan. Let's get serious. And he also says, where you make your money is where you reside. Yeah, it's where you wake up every morning and you make your money. That's where you reside. Nonetheless, because of the way they have corrupted the electoral process in order to steal elections, using the bribery of overseas voters, using no cap, no regulation of campaign spending, they now have arrived at a position which they say the correctness of that position is unassailable. That there is no, Dr. Andre, I want you to listen to this, there is no, I want to, this one I have to get correct. I want to get this one correct. They say emphatically and they say categorically, the government of Dominica's position is correct to the point of being unassailable. It is unassailably correct. That is, residence is not a requirement, nor is it a determinative of a person's right to vote, as opposed to the right to be registered. And they go to the House of Assembly Elections Act, Section 27(2), which provided every person whose name appears on the official list of electors for any polling district shall be entitled to vote in that polling district, notwithstanding that he is not resident in that polling district on polling day. You see what I talk about when I say manipulation of provisions in the law, loopholes, because this provision is intended for people who are living in Dominica and who may have changed residence from one polling district to another. They're registered in Portsmouth, they're living in Colliho. And ordinarily, in the scheme of things, the law provides for there to be a transfer. You can have a transfer from Portsmouth to Colliho under the law. And that's okay, that's a process. When you have moved not from Portsmouth to Colliho, but from Portsmouth to the United States, where are you going to be transferred to? You gotta be transferred to a polling district in the United States, And so the law, consistent with the provision of the Constitution, says a time comes when you have made yourself ineligible to be on the register because of the residence qualification, and so your name should be taken off. We have had an electoral commission and chief elections officers who have been negligent, deficient, totally incompetent in this matter of keeping a voters list clean with the removal of names on the register that ought not to be there because the persons are dead, or by law they've been living overseas for more than 5 years. And where there was required now to be a clarification in the law, where legal clarity was required on the question of residence overseas and the ineligibility of persons who are living overseas to be voting in elections in Dominica for representation in polling districts where they don't live, in a country where they don't live and therefore can't be represented, where the legal clarity was supposed to be provided in the law to set that straight. They instead decided the law will provide that once your name is on the register, it should remain there indefinitely. That, to me, is a violation of the constitutional principles for voting in Dominica, based on voting, the enlightened principle of voting where you live. And it is tied in with the lack of campaign finance regulation, where this government not only wants to protect its pool of overseas voters that can be bribed to come home to affect election results, but also they want the money to be able to spend that money, all of the passport money that they're spending, and to spend it whichever way they want, to do whatever they want to purchase elections. And Dominicans have to understand, essentially, we're standing for the rights of the people of Dominica living in Dominica to elect a government in charge of the lives of those of us who are living in Dominica. And anything else is unfair. So we cannot be talking about fair elections in Dominica at the same time that we're talking about going to Parliament with these pieces of legislation, which taken together will give us results of that nature. You have also in the House of Assembly election bill, not the House of Assembly election bill, the commission, the Electoral Commission bill, there are really no provisions for improving or securing the independence of the Electoral Commission. So you'll have a commission that is under the thumb of the ruling party, as has been for the last God knows how long, and you will have an a chief elections officer working under the direction and control of the ruling party. And an electoral commission and a chief elections officer, without the independence, not exercising the independence that the Constitution guarantees them for their functions, cannot supervise fair elections in Dominica. You know. We know where they are. The majority is set up to be on the side of the ruling party, and the ruling party has ensured the appointment of a chief elections officer in whom it is well pleased, and who obviously will do the work of the government, the ruling party. Understand that the confirmation that is proposed, when we talk about cleaning the list, the confirmation that is proposed is going to span a period of 15 months. So no name can be removed from the register until after 15 months, because who knows whether I'm going to register, whether I'm going to confirm in month 1 or in month 12 or in month 15. So it will be, they say everybody who is on the list is on the list, and in order to stay on the list, you must confirm. So you confirm. You have a 15-month period to confirm. So for 15 months, all that will happen on that list is people who are dead should be taken off, and people who are dead should be taken off. That's all. And people whose names are objected to because they are living overseas, but now the law says that's not a reason for taking a name off the list anymore. The law is now in effect. You have a confirmation period that has started. So all that can happen on that list for 15 months is that the authorities will remove or can remove names of dead people, which they have not done, and I don't think they're going to do either. So for 15 months, you're going to have essentially the same list of persons. And during that 15 months, an election can be called. There's nothing in the new law that says, well, no, you can't call elections if the Electoral Commission is not ready for elections. It says, the Prime Minister maintains the provision that the Prime Minister can call elections whenever he wants. So he can call election anytime within 15 months, being the kind of person that he is. And then he has the same old bloated list available to him to manipulate and to bring in whoever he wants from wherever he wants to affect the result. That is what essentially we are fighting against. And that is why we're standing. Because now we have, after asking for reforms to improve the process, after asking for reforms to remove the taints of the process, we have reforms. They tell us we have new legislation. They tell us they go to Parliament with reform, but it's reform for scare, not reform of the process in the interest of the people's right to fair elections, but reforms to suit Roosevelt's Skerrit re-election legacy and to protect the strategies that he's used, the tactics that he's used to steal elections in Dominica over the last 20 years. It is important for Dominica to stand in massive numbers tomorrow, because this is one man against the people of Dominica, against the people of Dominica and their right to fair elections, their right to elect their own government of the people, by the people, for the people. How could you appropriate that onto yourself and get away with it for so long? It is not your role and responsibility to decide who the government should be. That's the people's responsibility. The people with the right to vote. That is their responsibility under the Constitution, not yours. And so people must decide. as they sit in their homes tonight, you know, we all need to be outside of the parliament tomorrow. We all need to assemble outside of the parliament tomorrow. Whether we are grandmothers and grandfathers, mothers, fathers, whether we are brothers, sisters, children, aunties, uncles, men power, whether we are teachers, we are nurses, we are police officers, we are doctors, we are clerical people, we are farmers, we are masons, we are carpenters. We are the children of Dominica who are unemployed. We are those who are struggling to make ends meet. We are those who cannot pay the bills. All of us, looking at the situation that confronts us now, where one man and his gang in government is trying to take from the people, take from us, we the people, our right to elect government of the people, by the people, for the people, with our majority votes of conscience, have to stand tomorrow. Come out of your house. Let's be together, all of us. Let's be together tomorrow to say in one voice, what you're doing is not acceptable, and we are not accepting it. And we demand changes to ensure that our right to vote, those of us who live in Dominica, our right to vote government for the country in which we're living is protected by the electoral process. And we're not marginalizing that process and disenfranchising that process because you are using external forces to control us and to dominate us in Dominica.
So,
It's not right.
so all right. So Lennox, I hear you, and I want to hear Johnson, Boston. Also, you want to turn on your mic and tell us why you believe that the people must turn out tomorrow in large numbers to make their presence felt, their voices heard, so that the government can be persuaded to stop the reading of those bills and to listen to the opposition.
Well, Mr. G, good night to you, to Dr. Andre, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, Mr. Lennox Linton, Senator Paris, Lambi, and Sherwin, and the others in the Q family, and listeners at home and abroad of this very important program, The Global View. This electoral reform issue, we have been on this road for quite some time. In fact, a number of the other islands in the Caribbean were doing reforms, and they've left us behind. Long ago, they left us behind, and they settled in their reform, and they have in the democratic elections. I mean, parties come forward, they put their case to the people, they outline their programs, their policy, and the people decide. In Dominica, we seem to have a malay that we have been talking reform for all these years, and one individual who have hijacked the role of the Electoral Commission and feels he's the supremo of everything, and therefore he must do his bidding, and he must ignore the rights and freedoms of the citizens and our right to have good things. And reform is a very important exercise, and reform is not something that came to us just a couple of years ago. Reform have been on the table for many years, and I have read where you had to have monies and properties and estates to run for election. Our forefathers felt that was not how democracy should operate. So you give those who have economic power, political power, and they can use the opportunity to fashion their own business into themselves, and the rest of the country would be squeezed and fall apart. Then women could not vote. So when the men voted, they covered the women in the voting. And the reform in those days brought women to vote. So women today can participate in the process. You had to be 21 years old to vote. And reform felt it was probably too a long time for the young people to participate in the process, and they moved it to 18 years. So reform has done things, good things, that benefit the electoral process, because elections have consequences. When you vote for a candidate, you vote for a parliament, you vote for a government, you expect the government to become the custodian of your affairs and to govern the country properly. So we have been talking, and I cannot understand for the like of me, where a government would have citizens who are willing to sit down honestly with them and discuss the issues and arrive at good proposals that at the end of the day all of us can feel happy about. We can shake hands and we can work together and say, well done, my good and faithful soldiers. Why should we be fighting? And we see that while a lot of us in the ARC, in the political parties, UWP, Freedom Party, and others, have a genuine interest in this thing, the Labour Party and Mr. Skerritt in particular have a trickery operation in this thing because they feel that if they can trick the country and if they can legalize the loopholes that presently exist, then they can say now they have the right to do those things that they have been doing, let's say, and even sometimes they do it openly, like they have a right to do it, but they still have little, navigation to make. But if they legalize it now, they can stand and say, here it is legalized, and we're free to do those things we're doing. We have been talking about the question of, and it was mentioned earlier on, campaign finance regulation. And we saw in the past the kind of monies that was spent, and the playing field cannot be leveled. If you have one party spending thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in a campaign, and the rest of us who want to participate to give the country a choice, we may just have a couple hundred of dollars, couple $1,000 to do so. And therefore, the party with the most money would win an election, not because they have good proposals and they have good persons who can articulate and who can manage the affairs of the country, but because they have monies to buy election and so forth. And we mentioned the marginal seats where they bring in votes because they have that kind of monies available to them. The other thing we felt that need to be looked at is the voter identification card. We should put this thing in law that the biometric data and all of this in the card should be legislated, so it is not left on the discretion of the chief elections officer to decide election after election what goes in the card. It's there in law to guide us. And this is a simple thing we're asking to do, and the government is playing hardball. The other thing, though, is the re-registration versus the reconfirmation. And we felt that you have a voters list with over 74,000 voters on that list. And you have a population of just about 70 or so, even less, 1,000 persons. And you're saying your voters, this is more than your population. So really something has to be done about that. And we're saying, why not let everybody re-register? So every voter who gets on the voters list did so equally under equal circumstances. Why you have some voters who will get VIP treatment, and I learned from one of their key people that they already have looked at their 4,000 voters that they bring in every election, spread around marginal seats to win. And what they want to do now is if they succeed with the reconfirmation, but these people, they can assist them to come down to reconfirmed, and then they give the 12 months, the free extra months, make it 15 months, to then remove the others, because I will tell you the majority of Dominicans in the diaspora does not support the Labour Party, neither does not subscribe to Mr. Skerritt's policy. So they know that, but they have a 3,000 to 4,000 that they can manipulate to support them in marginal seats, and they want to secure that. And then after that, now, when that is secured, those who are outside, who may have a vote, and they're outside and will not take bribe to vote or come in an election to vote and so forth, when they'll be out there, their vote will be taken away from them, and they will have a voice, yes, but they will not have a vote. And if they have to get back on the list, they have to come and reside in a polling division for 3 months, where some people get in, just call and say, I am John Brown, I'm on the list, yes, and I call to reconfirm, and so forth. And we are saying, let us just scrap this and let us have a re-registration so everybody get on the list equally and so on. And I can't see what is hard in doing these things. But the Prime Minister said that we asked for reform, and know that they're giving reform, and we are against it. So if you ask your parents for a glass of juice or a plate of food, and you're hungry, and they decide, okay, to satisfy your asking, we'll give you a glass of poison, Would you just drink it? Take it and say, okay, thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Mommy? No. And that is what we are seeing that Mr. Skerritt wants to do, is to legalize the loopholes and so forth. And to me, it is so hard to believe that these things are glaring. We have spoken for years. There are others who have come in here, observers, and observed. And when they heard the amount of money spent in our election, they were shocked. So these things are very clear. And I think when people work together and work in a united effort, the country succeed. And at this point, we should not be engaged in this reform bills and go in there and saying this and saying all these things. We should be together inside of Parliament, on the talk shows, discussing what we have worked together to achieve. But we are still there trying to get the government, the Prime Minister, to understand that you cannot go to Parliament and pass a bill that would give you, as a party, an advantage to exploit loopholes to stay in the government. And when you work it out, the country is worse off. I mean, this government has gotten the most monies than any other government. If you look at when I was in Parliament and we passed the VAT, the amount anticipated to raise from VAT, we raised more than that, plenty more than that. Then they've received passport monies. We have received monies for storms and all of that. And where is this money? I mean, look at our roads. You drive on the roads, and I mean, every road you go on, whether it's a secondary road or major road, you're in a pothole. And you go to the rest of the territories and you see people are sailing, they have their problem, yes, but they're sailing better. I'll give you an example though. I have a cousin who was here working, and she was in a particular institution. They gave her a month to month. So every month you get your salary, but you have to sign a new contract for the other month. So you know how you're not settled, you cannot take a loan, you cannot improve yourself. And she went to St. Kitts and got a good job and said to me she just felt the world open for her. She was in a dark spot in a country of birth. And she went to another country and she just felt the world is open for her. And that's where we're at. And we're saying, let us put in place the proper electoral system that gives the people the opportunity to elect the government, to elect their parliament, and therefore we can have a semblance of unity and togetherness in this country, so we can build our country to the betterment of our people. Another thing I am very disappointed about is the fact that every time the opposition or people opposed to the government has an event, the government, in a quest to divide the country and divide people, they go around saying we want violence. And the police were supposed to protect the citizens, maintain the law and so forth, and order in the country, then they buy into that and so forth. And I think people have a right to dissent. People have a right, if something is not working for them, to stand against it and ask the government to correct it. I mean, we were on a talk show the other day, and I mentioned when we in cabinet passed an SRNO, and that SRNO we passed to increase the license of vehicles. And the taxi and bus drivers, they came and they decided to demonstrate against that. And then Rosie Douglas, may soul rest in peace, and a few others in the Labour Party get involved, and they had a massive demonstration. I remember when Charles Maynard, may soul rest in peace, and Brian Aline were coming from Belfast to go to work. They called me. I said, I'm not going to chance and passing that. They were blocked. They walked from Kinfield to government headquarters. And then the guys met us the following day in cabinet. And when they met us there, the same Charles Maynard said he never realized the hike of the increase until he went to pay his own license. And we sat down there with Rosie and the bus and taxi gentle people, and we listened to them, and the matter was solved. So when you come out in those peaceful assembly, is to solve problems. So the government will see you, will understand that you're not satisfied with what they're doing. And if the government is a sensible government, a modern thinking government, and not an arrogant group of people, they will sit with you and understand and make the changes. But they are adamant because these loopholes give them an advantage to steal election, to be in power, and they've been in power, just have the country falling apart and so on. So we're saying, Dominicans, it is important that you come out tomorrow and show the government, show the region and the world that you are not satisfied with the electoral reform bills that are going to Parliament. A few persons we spoke to said, we can help you all in the various international organizations, but you have to show that you're willing to help yourself. You can't stay home, sit back, and expect us to help you when you make no effort to help yourself. And this is why Dominicans must recognize and appreciate the fact that they must be out there supporting themselves. The young people, as Thompson said earlier on, is not something being done for us. I mean, yes, if it happens, we will participate, we will enjoy it, but the future of it is yours. And I remember as a young boy, 14 years old at the time, and I was fully engaged and involved in politics. I went to meetings and spoke as a young man, 14 years old, my mind. And I think young people today, even brighter than those of us in the early days, should be out there, getting informed, getting educated on those issues, and being out there to demonstrate that they have a country to protect and a country to build. And together with those of us who are up front now, we can work to do that. And I think I just again want to appeal to Dominicans. We're having a peaceful assembly tomorrow outside of Parliament. Normally the police blocked all the areas. They blocked from Fort Young way up around by DBS there and the other side by the Wasco. I understand tonight they're blocking all around the what do you call that, income tax area. So where we were the last time, all that I understand has been blocked and so forth. And I do not understand why they don't appreciate the fact that the people have a right to dissent. Thank you, Mr. G.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bosso. I'm going to go to Lambi in a minute to give out the telephone numbers so that the folks can call in and express their views. And then I would be going to Dr. Andre. But I just want to read a comment, at least one comment I see on Facebook in regards to the question of the reconfirmation. Somebody is writing that the people who are in charge of doing this, in fact, they can claim that persons came in and confirmed even when they have not even visited the island. So you see, this is just a possibility. So it depends on who are the people who are supervising this thing there. They could make that claim. And in fact, the reconfirmation process is flawed. So in fact, the re-registration is what in fact should take place, the complete re-registration in Lambi. Lambi, could just give out the telephone number so we can take the calls if these people want to make a call.
The Global View and Q, the numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, all local numbers. The overseas number 305-432-9624. Let me run those one more time. 449-3095-9697, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. Back to you, Mr. G.
Yeah, so if the calls come in, just make us a signal and we'll stop to take the call, Lambi. So, Dr. Andre, I mean, you've listened to Thompson, you've listened to Lennox, you've listened to Delbert, you've listened to Johnson, Boston. Your thoughts, I mean, going into this thing, because tomorrow it's a very important day, in fact. And I really wish that people would really turn out in the very large numbers and make their presence felt and their voices heard, to send a clear message to the political directorate that what they're doing is wrong, that they, in fact, they are omitting things that they should not be omitting. Lambi, let's take a call.
Yes, we do. Caller, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
So many distinguished men speak there tonight. I'm really happy to know we have such educated people in our land, especially what is his name again? Miss the one that is the lawyer there.
Dr. Andre.
Oh, Dr. Andre, may God bless you. And all for you know, but I give him a little extra. I have two things troubling me. I am married for 31 years, and I'm living in Portersville about maybe 25 to 24. You know, but over 21 years. And my name is in Marigot. It never come out. It never come out in my little community. Every time I have to hide transport to go up and vote with.
Oh, wow.
I may not like voting in my ward, but to me that is nonsense. My name should be where I am. My husband too. His name was in Rose. His name is in Rose up to now. His name should be in the Pottersville. So we really need a re-registration thing.
Right.
Yes, I believe a lot of people just not talking about that. Another woman told me there, she called me yesterday, told me her auntie died. She went to inform them. They took out the auntie on when she spoke to them, they took out her auntie for that year. When she went back again to vote, the auntie name is back on the list. Are you hearing, you know?
Yes. Yes,
There's a lot of tricks going on with that election, and I am not happy with it. And Mr. Prime Minister Skerrit must stop telling lies, because he lie and say he paid me for my house and land in Wesley. It is for 9 siblings, and I haven't got a cent. Not even a meeting he kept with us to say, well, I cannot pay you now, I'll pay you later. That is very, very bad. So I just hope that the people will come out. I tell you tonight, I have a diarrhea since last week. Stop off and he come back. So I hope it better just so it plays, because I want to be counted. Dominica, we have to stand up, else we will go down underwater. Good night to all of you, and thanks for listening. I listen well. Bye-bye.
Good night, Ms. Dalrymple, and we really feel for you. We really feel for you. I mean, all this time that your property has been taken and you're not getting paid for it and compensated for it, we really feel for you. Dr. Andre, your thoughts on all of this and why Dominicans should really turn out in the very large numbers tomorrow?
Well, let me say that I wish the lamentations of your last caller, Ms. Dalrymple, was not true. I wish Dominicans did not have to beg for what they deserve. I wish they did not have to beg at a time when your prime minister, for God's sakes, is boasting that foreigners exported over $240 million to their relatives abroad. I wish I did not have to remember that one Zampoli, who is Dominica's ambassador, mind you, in New York, sued and received $30 million for selling Dominican passports. I wish NEP workers did not have to be banging down the door at the credit union in Point Michel to get the few $100s for the work that they do. I wish people from Wesley did not have to beg for compensation for their own property in their own land. I wish the people who worked for public works did not have to beg for their gratuity or what is owed to them. I wish there were no civil servants now who have to keep their mouth shut so that they would get the promotion that they deserve. I wish hospital workers did not have to do with virtually no amenities to do their work, or teachers, but they must maintain their silence because they've seen how vicious the sort of retribution and revenge is being wielded in Dominica over anybody who is thought to be in opposition to these folk. And this is why when we stand, it is not just about voting. It is about a way of life. It is about the ability to put food on your table, to provide for your children, to be able to get the promotion that you deserve, not on account of whatever views that you have politically speaking, but on the basis of your competence, whether in the police force, whether in the civil service. And this is just so blatantly wrong, it's just not funny.
Dr. Andrew, can we just take a call? Lambi, go ahead.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
This is Boots on the Ground.
How are you doing?
Good night to all the gentlemen on the panel. And my input tonight is to do with voter ID card. I am part of an experience in 2005 when my wife was from Casibus and was in Roseau living for a couple of years. And she had registered in Roseau to vote, but her name was also on the list in Casibus. And when the election called, after the election commission called her, and they said that she had voted in 2 places. And she had to confirm that she voted only in Roseau, since Roseau was where she was resident. Now, if this lady had a voter ID card, then whoever it was that voted on her name in Casibus would not have been able to do it. And I remember on that election, there was a win in Casibus by 1 vote. And if they had to take the matter to court, she would have to then stand against one of her first cousins, which she was not in favor of getting done. So the decision she made was to confirm that her voting position is Roseau as her residence. So I am saying that in standing on a voter ID card, which is what we need to correct those types of events, we must stand up tomorrow and seek to get the solution to a voter ID card, that every voter will be 1 man, 1 vote. Because that situation we have, a number of people went through that same thing that my wife went through. So this is my input on that discussion tonight.
Yeah, and thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that contribution. Lam, you have another call? Dr. Andre, you want to just complete your thoughts?
Yeah. So what I was basically saying, this is a fight for the future of Dominica, its future existence as a democracy, its future existence as a place where people can prosper, people can work hard and see the fruits of their labor. Not a place which becomes a playground for the rich and for the oligarchs who are so brazenly and sickeningly flaunting the fruits of their theft. Not a playground where persons can be just discriminated, persecuted, brought to court on trumped-up charges, belittled. Not a place where leaders are inciting persons to go after those who oppose the political directorate, and they're not even charged, not even their batteries are being charged. The police look elsewhere, and they go to church. Those hypocrites, they go to church and pray and throw up their arms in the air and say, "How great thou art." This is not what we want as a country. We want a country where people can be proud and free, where people are not mocked after being deprived of opportunities in their own land, after being relegated to the sidelines, when their own taxes are being used to persecute them. These legal bandits from Trinidad, they walked away with millions of dollars to do what? A sixth form, a state college student could have made a better case in court than they did. And we must stay silent? Stay silent? As we used to say in Portsmouth, joke you making, Mr. G.
So exactly. So Lambi, you want to take a call?
Yes. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Hello, good evening to everybody on the panel.
Good evening.
Oh, I'm a senior citizen. I like to say I'm a senior citizen. I like to be educated. Now I want to ask a question, but before I ask the question, I want to see. I went to the Wesley Primary School. After I left the Wesley Primary School, I went to the Convent High School. No, I did not eat my school fees. I tried to learn what my grandmother taught me, what my teachers taught me, and so on, right? So right now I want to ask this. I also did, when I was doing my public administration, we did a little course also in political science. And I know politicians, and so I'm not foolish, okay? Now I want to ask the question. Anybody can, how long will it take to arrive at a formula for campaign financing? I am asking that because to me, the way the Prime Minister spoke at his press conference, as is a technical thing, it will take some time. And even mention as they did for the Caribbean islands, they would want to have one rule for campaign financing. Now, if you want to go that way, that will take a long time because that to me is not an emergency for the other Caribbean islands. I also want to ask, in Mr. Byron's report, did he recommend a formula for campaign financing? Now, if he did not recommend the formula, can the government ask him for, because I heard you talking about, they looked at Jamaica model. Now, if he did not recommend the formula, can the government ask him for a formula so that he can arrive at a figure for campaign financing? After we do that, in a year or two, then we can go to the Caribbean people and say, well, let us look at it again and put something else in place. But we cannot wait for that. So I'm just asking those two questions. Thank you.
Right, and thanks a lot for that, Dr. Andre. I think you can.
Yes, I commend the lady for the question. In simple English, with respect to the last question, whether in fact Sir Byron recommended, yes, he did. And all this nonsense about how difficult it is, it's absolute rubbish. It is as simple. When I was in high school, I used to count on my fingers, 1, 2, 3. 1 plus 3 is 1, 2, 3, 4. You can use that same old method of counting to come up with a formula for campaign finance reform. This is the biggest crock that is being advanced by these folk who are gaining or looking for every silly excuse to justify why they do not want campaign. I heard the Prime Minister talk about how difficult it is. How difficult it is. Putting the proceeds of sale of passport money in mysterious accounts is much more difficult than arriving at a formula for campaign finance reform. And this business about the Caribbean leaders trying to come up to an agreement, nonsense. The Jamaicans have come up with their own. And even Antigua has come up with something. There is nothing difficult about it. The simple question is, do they have the will? Do they have the intention of doing something which they have gotten away with for 15 and plus years? The answer is quite simple. No. Look around Roseau and see how many of these mysterious dark houses that are going up. And then you will find out why they want nothing to do with campaign finance reform. You don't have to look far. You don't have to do any homework. Just look around and you know what is happening. Dominica is being robbed of its very future under our very noses. That's the problem.
Yeah, Dr. Fontaine, I wanted to hear your thoughts on this as well, because this question the city asked about campaign finance reform. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. If you're with us, if you could turn on your mic and you could probably try to address that question. Are you with us? Yeah,
Yes,
so
I am, Mr. G. And on the question of, how difficult it is, I mean, as Dr. Andrew said, it's not at all difficult. In fact,
Lennox, would you turn your mic off a minute?
it's not at all difficult. In fact, I don't even quite get it why we have to spend so much time on this. This is relatively straightforward. You know, it's not like we're inventing a new machine. It is well known what needs to be done. It has been written, it has been proposed, even within our current legislation. All we had to do was just tweak a few things here and there, introduce the voter ID card, and introduce, some campaign finance reform, and introduce something to do with the voters list, give us a clean list. But one thing is very clear: it appears to be difficult because the prime minister wishes to confuse the Dominican public, because at the end of the day, he wants to maximize. In other words, he doesn't make it as easy as possible for him to win another election. And the way he has won elections in the past is by having a bloated list, bringing people in to vote, and effectively canceling out the impact of those on the ground. And that's his formula. That is his winning formula. And he's now trying to ensure that whatever legislation he gives maintains that winning formula. So that's what that's all about. In the absence of a Mr. Skerritt wishing to keep his cheating legacy, we will not even be having this conversation tonight. We'll probably be talking about how we can develop agriculture, how we can put Dominicans to work, and how we can make the country move forward. Yet we're spending time on an issue which really we should not be spending so much time on. It is an easy thing to do.
Yes, and certainly Jamaica has done it. Lambi, did you have a call? Let's take it.
There was someone on there. Let's see if he's still there. Good evening, caller. Are you there? No.
Okay, so let us move on. Lennox, your thoughts on all of this? I mean, tomorrow is in fact the day. I think Dominicans have to come out tomorrow and really show their face in the place and to make their voices heard and their presence felt.
I just got something here from a patriot. He's he's saying that Dominicans need to understand what has happened with the economic landscape of Dominica over the last 25 years. So he sent me something. He says that he's going to be circulating at the assembly tomorrow. It says, I'm reading it here. It says, in commemoration of the 20-year legacy of unfair elections, the Dominica Labour Party announces the death of over 100 companies and the thousands of jobs they provided. And it goes on to list a whole set of companies that have gone the way of the dodo bird, have fallen into the graveyard over the last 20 years. It's actually staggering when you look at it. I never thought of it in those terms. We always say, businesses are closing down and so on. But when you see all of these companies in a single space, just you look at it, it's really staggering. And so the Patriot says he's going to be giving out those tomorrow, so that people see, they have an idea. But I am minded to say that last week, on this question of elections having consequences and stolen elections, unfair elections having brutal consequences, the consequences of people not being able to change their government are severe. When a ruling party decides it has gotten in there and nobody else will move it, then the people are the ones who suffer. So look at the case of Dominica and Antigua. Last week, the Prime Minister of Antigua, Gaston Brown, was making the point that since he came into office in 2014, last 10 years, his government has been able to grow the GDP of Antigua from 3.8 billion to 6 billion, which is a growth of 2.2%, $2.2 billion in value of goods and services. And he makes the point that growth is larger than the economy of Dominica, the entire economy of Dominica, because, of course, the total value of goods and services in Dominica has not yet reached 2 billion. It is at about 1.8 billion now, which means that for 25 years under the same government, we added just about $1 billion to the value of goods and services in the economy. 25 years it took us to add 1 billion. Antigua, from 2014, change of government, 2014, was able to add $2.2 billion in value to its economy. You do the math on that and you understand why is it that we are so incapable of employing our young people, why we are so incapable of providing good paying jobs, why things are the way they are when we have so much money. And remember, Antigua did this in the last 10 years without anything close to the amount of passport money that Dominica has had. Dominica has $8.2 billion or thereabout of passport money unaccounted for under the control of Mr. Skerritt's friends overseas. And these are the brutal consequences of stolen elections. When people feel that they have purchased your vote to determine results in elections, they're not accountable to you because you can't move them. As far as they're concerned, you can't move them. Your vote can do nothing. They don't have to account to you. And of course, when they pay you, when the ruling party pays you for your vote, the transaction is complete. We cannot have an electoral system in 2025 that is based on these things. And that is why when people stand tomorrow, it cannot be just about tomorrow. It has to be about making sure that we get the changes that are necessary this time. And if those who are in the parliament are not going to make the changes, the Dominican people must change them. It is that serious.
Thank you for that, Lennox. In a minute, I will want to go back to Delbert Paris for his further comments. So if he's listening, if he's standing by, he can, make himself seen so that we can come to him. But Thompson, I wanted to go back to you shortly. Yeah, Delbert, I'll come to you in a minute. I wanted to go back to you, Thompson, because to talk about this thing. You see this list that Lennox is talking about of firms and companies that we have lost over the last 20 years. I mean, it's a staggering list. I mean, we talked about that on this program before, and Matt has talked about it on he's talking about program and so on. And it's a staggering list of businesses that have failed, that have closed under this regime. Thompson, your thoughts? Your mic is muted.
Yes, it is truly mind-boggling when you consider how the terrible performance of this government as it relates to being able to maintain businesses, cultivate new ones, and so on. We've lost basically the lifeblood of Dominica's economy, in addition to agriculture. I mean, it is small business owners. It is local Dominicans, some of whom had businesses for many years. For example, Bello was over 200 years, or probably not 200, but close to 200 years old. GCP, one of the veritable institutions that for so long existed and did so well, and you have the countless small business owners, and in that number is not counted the number of small shopkeepers, boutique owners, supermarket owners that have lost their businesses over this period. So I think it's testament to the fact that the government has failed terribly the people of Dominica and have done nothing really to improve the livelihoods of the people. And that's all the more reason why we need electoral reform. Because in the absence of electoral reform, we are stuck with this government, this thing that passes for a government that is just completely hurting Dominicans over and over again. And that's why Dominicans need to step up. That's why, Mr. G, we are calling Dominicans to step up tomorrow in a big way. Let us send a message of numbers, that we are united, that we are speaking with one voice, that we are together on this.
Yeah, certainly, absolutely. But Delbert, what about the hopes and aspirations and the dreams of all these young people, these young enterprising people, these young entrepreneurs who have little cottage industries that have wanted to thrive? Many of them have come and gone because the businesses got shut down. Your thoughts on all of this? I mean, what it is that needs to be done now to bring back this era when enterprise was thriving, when entrepreneurship was a big drive. And because I know these young people are making efforts today, they want to move on, but they don't have the help.
Well, one of the things, Mr. G, is that In order to grow an economy, in order to grow your business, in order to grow, in order to create, you have to create an enabling environment where growth can thrive, where the same young entrepreneurs who have a lot of ideas and who are full of ingenuity can express that ingenuity. But more than just being able to express it, they need a partner. They need a partner in the private sector, and they also need an administration that understands how to build growth engines, how to understand the future prospects of what young people are trying to do. Creating an environment where young people can dream because they see a pathway to getting the job done. Mr. Boston was talking about a family member of his a while ago, living in Dominica, country of her birth, his or her birth, and was trying to work here and could barely make it. Moved over to St. Kitts, who doesn't have much more resources than we do, but they have an idea that they believe, where they believe the people of St. Kitts, those who come there to work and those who are born there, deserve better. And they deserve better increasingly. When they turn back and they look at their life and they look at the progress of their country and the people within their country, the most important resource, the human resource, they must be able to identify and measure the growth that they have. To the administration in St. Kitts, who coincidentally has a citizenship by investment program similar to what we do. But some way, somehow, you can see that money in St. Kitts. People can leave Dominica and go to St. Kitts and feel like the world has opened up, just a few stones away. Why is it that we don't have that same thing being replicated here? Instead, what we have is a thriving, more and more people being drafted into the NEP, which seems to be a black hole where they can't seem to get out. They just have bare minimum to be able to survive. And our young people aren't able to survive. It's because our governance system doesn't understand what it takes to create an enabling environment for growth, where young people can dream and express that dream through real, tangible, scalable enterprise, where they can find a partner in the private sector, find a partner in the public service, get involved in the enabling environment and grow their business, create a future for themselves, and not just for themselves, but they can also to create employment for other young people. We see it happening in the rest of the Caribbean. We see young people leaving state college here, trying to get a little work here some way, somehow. Some of them at call center and they move around. And in a few short weeks or a few short months, they go over to Antigua and they're able to buy a good car, have a proper savings, being able to send back money here to take care of their parents and their siblings, and so pay off some debts for their parents here, and move into buying land and buying a house in very short periods. They do it in the Northern Caribbean as well. What is preventing us from being able to do that here? I'll tell you what it is. It's because we don't have a system of governance. We don't have a system, an electoral system that is free and fair, where the people who are living with the consequences of the governance system that we have, their voices are being drowned out, and they're not able to select the people who are able to put their interests first. Rather, we have people who are putting their own personal interest and the interest of their friends, both here and overseas, before the interests of the people in Dominica. And it's time for that to change. It's time for us to have an electoral system that allows us that allows our voices to be heard in a very strong way. And we will see that happen tomorrow, and it will be the start of a new day in Dominica.
Yes, I'll come back to you in a minute for your closing remarks. So you'll be able to tell the young people why they should come out in very large numbers tomorrow and stand firm and make their voices heard. But I want to go to Johnson Boston now to make his sort of closing remarks. Also, if you're with us, you could open up your mic and be seen. If you're not with us, and I will go to somebody else. All right. So Bosso is not with us. All right. So Delbert, maybe I can let you. I know you have your work tomorrow. And Bosso, are you with us? All right. So, Delbert, I know you have stuff to do tomorrow, so I want to let you go. So I'll give you a chance to make your closing remarks now while you're at it.
Mr. G, my closing remarks are going to be very short. You know, we've been here for 2 hours. We've said a lot. Electoral reform and standing for the right to free and fair,
Yes.
undiluted, uncompromised elections and an electoral system that allows the people and the residents who live and who are affected and who have to live with the consequences of elections are important to everyone. But most importantly, they are important to our young people. And why is that? Because our young people are the ones who are expected to live with those consequences for the longest period of time. We're expected that our young people are the ones who will grow up and have to live with the consequences of these decisions for the longest period of time. And people like to say that the young people are the future. And in some senses, that is true, but the young people are the now. It is said that the test of great men is where they plant trees in whose shade they will never sit. The shade of the trees that we are planting now, the young people is who will enjoy it, and they will eat the fruits of that tree as well. They must ensure tomorrow and in the days coming after that, that we plant the tree in the right place and that we plant the right type of trees. And they are involved in the process of securing the future that they would like to see for themselves in the country of their birth. That they would like to see their friends and their sisters and their loved ones overseas come back and live in Dominica, because finally we will be making all of the efforts and creating the Dominica that is finally the best place to live, the best place to work, and the best place to enjoy life. Mr. G, thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure being here. I'll see you guys tomorrow on the
Yes.
front.
Yes, we'll hear you tomorrow as well in the parliament.
For sure.
Johnson, Boston, if you're able to turn on your mic, I mean your closing remarks, and
Yes.
tell the people why they really need to come out in your numbers tomorrow and stand strong.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, when you called me earlier on, I was there, but the system was kind of messing up.
Right.
But let me thank you, Mr. G, and the other colleagues for tonight's program. And in fact, I'm getting some messages on my phone that people are very pleased with the program, the content of the program, and what we have spoken about. And we have made it clearer to them, although they knew what we were talking about before, but clearer to them as to what they should be out there for tomorrow. And they understand that election have consequences, and every party and every candidate who want to contest election in Dominica going forward should be on a level playing field. And that's what we're fighting for, because if you run for Labour, you're not more Dominican as opposed to run for UWP or Freedom or other parties. We're all citizens. And the people will determine among persons who come before them who they want to send to Parliament to represent their interests and so on. And I think while you may prefer your party to win, and you may be disappointed if your party loses, but you have to understand in democracy that we have to work together to build the country. And I want to say to Dominicans in every corner of Dominica to come out, to show yourself that you are interested in your business. You can't be a spectator in your affairs. You have to be a participant. And democracy is strengthened when people understand what democracy does for them. It gives you an opportunity to express yourself, to be in a democratic country and to participate in democratic elections, and to work to build a country where your livelihood and your social well-being can improve and you can live happily in your country. I want to see among us here, Delbert is the youngest. I want to join him to appeal to the young people, to show the young leaders that we have that you are ready to work with them and with the rest of us to build a stronger and a better Dominica. Thank you so much, Mr. G, and thank you to your listeners at home and abroad for listening tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Bosso. Lennox, your closing remarks and what you want to impress upon the people why they should be out there tomorrow in their numbers. Your mic is muted. Yeah, you need to unmute your mic.
Yeah, we got that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. G.
Yeah.
Okay, so closing remarks. Tomorrow is a very important day for Dominica. It's an important day because the people of Dominica have been challenged, and the people of Dominica have been challenged with the agenda for control of Dominica of one man who believes the country belongs to him, and it's his personal property. So he can continue to deny the people the right to transparent democratic process, and he wants to control the electoral machinery. So laws have been revised and a new law has been put in place. Taken together, there are provisions in those laws for the protection of Roosevelt Skerritt's agenda of stealing elections and bribing and cheating his way to have results go in his favor. Now, with the passage of these pieces of legislation, which they call reform, there will be cover, legal cover, for the illegalities that they have been engaged in. That's not acceptable. That's not reform. I've said before that is deform. That's electoral deform, not electoral reform. Because everywhere around the world, there are protections in electoral systems against bribery and cheating. Here we have the bribery and cheating as offenses in legislation, but where certain kinds of bribery and cheating have impacted elections and determined the results, this new legislation provides no legal clarity. For example, the transportation of voters from overseas to vote for a particular party in Dominica on the condition expressed or implied that it is bribery, on the condition expressed or implied that they will vote for a particular candidate or party is bribery. The law needs that for clarification, given the extent to which bribery of overseas voters has been used in the last 3, 4, 5 election cycles to determine the results of elections in Dominica. And if we're not going to address that, then we're not being serious about fair elections in Dominica. If we're not going to put in the campaign finance regulations, then we're not being serious about elections, fair elections in Dominica either. We only want elections that will redound to the benefit of one man and his chosen few in certain circles. This is not good for Dominica. And that is why Dominica must stand, because those who are benefiting are the few around Mr. Skerritt, and those who are suffering are the majority of the people of Dominica. And so it would be nice to see a majority of Dominicans outside of the parliament tomorrow, because this is Dominica's business. The few of us on the panel tonight, we advocate, we speak about what needs to be done. We speak about the importance of standing and standing firm for proper reforms for fair election, because those fair elections will have wonderful, good implications for Dominica. Where people are able to change their government, people get better results from government, because government is more accountable to them and government works harder for them as opposed to just working for themselves. These people in government in the last 25 years have essentially been working more and more for themselves, and you can see how the lives of people have been devalued. You've seen how the lives of people are disintegrating in their healthcare, in the garbage collection around the country, in the money that they're making or cannot make, in the bills they cannot pay, in the healthcare they don't. It just goes on and on and on as the struggle to survive gets harder and harder for the people, while it gets easier and easier for the chosen few to be involved in luxurious living at the expense of the same Dominicans who are being crucified, whose franchise is being affected, where they come to the important business of voting a government. to take care of the affairs of us here in Dominica, not overseas, the affairs of Dominicans in Dominica. And the way it is set up right now, the system is now, has been designed around Roosevelt Skerritt's stolen elections legacy, so that he can continue to do what he's always done. And the business of Dominica now, the people of Dominica being able to change their government, has become more and more difficult, or is going to become more and more difficult with the passage of the bills that are before the parliament. And I don't know what told us we should have expected anything different, because the man told you what his agenda was. It is my re-election legacy. And unless Dominicans are willing to take drastic action, we're going to be beating the same old dead horse for years and years to come. I hope that's not the mindset of the people of Dominica. I hope they're ready to make some changes. And I hope they understand. I hope they understand that Dominica deserves leadership that respects the voices of the people of Dominica and upholds the integrity of our democratic systems or democratic freedoms. And this legitimizing of stolen elections, of stealing elections and unfair elections in Dominica is an affront to democracy, and it's an undeniable abuse of power, which in my view disqualifies Roosevelt Skerritt as a fit and proper person for leadership responsibility in Dominica, and he should go. If nothing happens tomorrow, if the government decides it is making no changes to fix what is broken with the electoral system, and they know exactly what needs to be fixed, the recommendations have been made. They had a parliamentary committee that was meeting over recent weeks. They discussed certain things. They know exactly what needs to change. And if they're not prepared to make those changes, Dominicans are going to have to take on the responsibility to make the changes. Crunch time. Time to decide where the people of Dominica stand. Are they standing for one man who wants to own and control Dominica for his billion-dollar gain? Or are the people of Dominica standing for Dominica? Because that's what this is all about. Where we stand. Where do we stand?
Well said, Lennox. We've lost Dr. Thompson Fontaine, so I'll have to say goodnight for him. But Dr. Andre, your closing remarks?
Yes, let me commend all the panelists for doing an excellent job. Let me thank the listeners. Mr. G, the question is very simple. Our people have to ask themselves certain questions and answer it themselves. They don't need any preaching from myself. Just they have to be reminded of the fact that their fight is against principalities, as the good book says, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ask themselves one question, well, more than one. Whatever happened in January 2017 when after they charged Lennox, whatever happened to the report by the Jamaican senior police soldier who wrote a report regarding what transpired? Why did they hide it? What happened to the report by those observers of those consultations that we had with respect to electoral reform? Why did they hide it? If it was complimentary to them, they would have printed it in 10,000 copies. Now, Mr. G, you made earlier references to businesses we lost. You're very charitable. It's not businesses we lost. It's businesses which were literally starved to death. Go ask Jerry Brisbane. Ask the galleries what about their hotels and their ability to probably finance and renovate their hotels. Even go on the ground and ask Blessings what happened to the money he donated or he gave to the small business, whatever the name is, in expectation of getting some money to build his business. Go ask Those persons who were given apartments, what happened to their relatives who lived in those apartments and passed away? Go ask the relatives of Monster B. Ask them whether they could use those apartments as leverage for loans. Go ask them what did they actually gain, or actually ask them what have they lost? Their financial independence. There's no gain in here. We're living in a place where unfortunately it has been rendered arid, devoid of growth, devoid of the ability to make its own people relatively comfortable in their own land. Ask the people of Wesley. Ask the people of Marigot. Go ask those small businesses. Can they sustain, or why haven't they not sustained their own businesses? It's because everything has conspired to send them right back into poverty from which they clawed themselves up. That is the reward for being a Dominican. Ask Dominicans if they are comfortable with that state of affairs. Don't feel sorry for me, I'm okay, guys. But ask those folks who are being battered down by that type of ruthless tyranny. We've never had this before in our lives, not in our history. And those who are afraid to say something, they have a reason for being afraid, because they should be ashamed of themselves. But Dominica has to stand up for itself and be counted. If not, the time for doing so may never return. So let me say thank you for listening. And I am always optimistic about the future, because I cannot afford to be despondent. I cannot afford to live in depression. I can only think of better days to come. Thank you very much.
And thanks a lot, Dr. Andre. Thanks a lot to Lennox. Thanks a lot, Dr. Thompson Fountain. Thanks a lot, Johnson Boston and Delbert Paris, and all the folks who've been with us all night on Facebook and YouTube and listening on the radio. Thank you so much all for tuning in tonight. And just want to say that tomorrow, we hope that tomorrow will be a great day, and that there'll be a good turnout tomorrow, and that the people of Dominica, the voice is heard, and that the people in the parliament will listen to those voices and make some changes in the legislation that they have before the parliament. So good night, everybody. Take care, guys.
Good night, Sheridan. Good night, all. Good night to everybody. Thank God.
Good night, Mr. G. Good night, everybody. And good night, listeners.
Delbert,
God
good
bless.
night,
Everybody,
Take
good
care.
night, good night. Take care. God bless.
All right. Good.
Great job.